Hey everybody, welcome back to another Nature's Always Right video. Today I've got Diego Footer with me. It's an absolute honor to have him here. He's somebody I've looked up to for a long time. I've been listening to his podcast for probably 5 or more years. Diego is a podcaster for the last 7 years. He does the podcast called Permaculture Voices. He also has many other podcasts called like Do the Work, Small Farming. He's did a whole series of podcasts with Curtis Stone. He has his own YouTube channel. He runs paperpot.co with Curtis Stone. That's where they sell their paper pot transplanters and many other small farming tools to help us farm the best that we possibly can. So Diego, thank you so much for coming out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm just telling Steven, we're in lower San Diego right now, southern San Diego. I'm in northern San Diego, so we're neighbors in the same county. It's interesting to see what somebody's doing in the same biome, but as diverse as San Diego is, it has similarities to what I have in North County, but it is very different when you get down to it.
It is. Yeah, we have so many different microclimates here in San Diego. It's pretty amazing.
Overall, I've found, San Diego is like a lot of places where I think when you're starting out, you got to learn exactly what your location's like, because there's a lot of elevations, there's pockets, you can get frost areas. Even on my property, I have a pretty big slope. The top of the property might not get frost, the lower area might get frost. It's adjusting, and that's one of the things we were talking about earlier, is just new people getting used to where you're growing, what you're growing, and settling in.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, one of the things I really wanted to ask you about and pick your brain on, because you've been involved in the regenerative agriculture movement for these past 7 years, bringing on the best minds in this world to your podcast or on your YouTube channel. If you ever want to see some of the best lectures online related to regenerative agriculture, check out Diego's YouTube, because I just watched one recently, like last night, J.M. Fortier's presentation that he's been giving this last year. It's up online for free for us to watch. So I wanted to ask Diego, if you think back 7 years ago, I started farming about 8 years ago. It was nowhere near this popular. There wasn't this much excitement about it. There wasn't a lot of young people that are interested in farming, but now I see a complete difference. I just wanted to get kind of your opinion on what you've seen develop over the last few years and kind of what you think the future is for us.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've really seen, and I like to think I spearheaded some of this, was a push towards being able to make a livelihood out of what you talk about, out of what the people who come on my channel talk about. When I got into it through permaculture, and that was a lot for homesteaders, backyard gardeners. That's all great. I'm not downplaying that at all. But I always thought, if somebody's doing permaculture, homesteading, when they come home from work on the weekends, what if they could do it all the time? Like, everybody wants to see more change happen out there. Well, one way you can get more change is if you can make your livelihood be the vehicle to create that change. So I always tried in the beginning to put forward examples of people doing something successfully, whether that's on the design side with, say, like Eric Olson of Permaculture Artisans in Northern California, or when I started talking to Curtis on the market gardening side. And this knowledge was out there. There's obviously been people doing it for a long time. Elliot Coleman, JM's book has been out longer than I've been doing podcasting, but it wasn't talked about as much. And now that I think these conversations are being had, and also with the advent of things like Instagram, YouTube really blowing up, this is part of the conversation. You're showing it from a beginner standpoint, meaning like you started doing this all fairly recently in scaling up of what goes into it all. So that's been one of the big changes I've seen, is taking the knowledge and really running with it to make a livelihood out of it. I've seen a lot of people start, I've seen a lot of success stories, and I've also just seen more knowledge brought out there. People who get inspired listening to me, Curtis, and then taking it, running with it like you, putting your own spin on it and doing it. So we've just kind of had that, the eye of the hurricane, and it's exploded outward.
Yeah, we hit a critical mass, I feel like, with the knowledge, the information getting out there, how-to videos. We have all these different amazing online courses now, all these amazing tools. So yeah, it's just this coalescence of all these different things that have now allowed small scale regenerative ag to flourish.
Yeah, it's a great support community too.
Yeah,
Through Instagram and even on a lot of YouTube channels. I mean, there's a lot of positivity out there and people trying to help, trying to encourage people. I mean, I don't know how it is in other spaces, but you can often reach out to a successful market gardener across the country or somewhere, ask questions. Hey, how are you doing that? How'd you figure that out? And for the most part, they'll give you a little bit of time and help you out within reason. And I think it's been this knowledge sharing, both peer-to-peer and online, that has contributed to that explosion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Like, I think before the internet, I think a lot of farmers kind of held knowledge close to themselves. Like, this is the way I do it, and I'm not going to share my special techniques or my special crops that I grow. But with this new ag movement, it's completely open source. I mean, you don't even have to buy Curtis Stone's book or take his online course. All the information is in his videos. Yeah, I think that's something really cool about our movement, as all of us are willing to share, to help each other. Right. And to me, it's like, it also exemplifies how business is changing now with the new generation coming into power and stuff. We think more synergistically, like the abundance mindset. Of course, there's competition, and competition is good for creating more innovation and getting things better. But like, I think that we've kind of figured out that if we work more synergistically, trying to, how can we share customers or swap customers, or I'll carry some of your products, you carry some of my products, or we, do videos together, we self-promote together. All these different ways that the internet now allows us to do, I think is also another big contributor. And I love that about the small farming community, is everyone's just such a amazing person.
Yeah, and we've almost gone from this from one side of the spectrum to the other. We went from a knowledge gap where knowledge was out there but unavailable, to now where it's abundantly available, and the hard part is focusing down on what knowledge do you take in, because you can become knowledge drunk and kind of analysis paralysis of, do I do this? Do I follow Steven? Do I follow Curtis, JM, Connor, Ben Hartman, whoever? And that can be a problem in and of itself. And one other way it's changed, and we were talking about this earlier, is I think now the market gardening blueprint has been figured out for the most part. Like 90% of it is there. There's obviously little tweaks everybody's going to have to make, but it's taken all this knowledge that Elliot Coleman, many people before, the spin people, Curtis, innovated and improved upon, and it's publicly available, very easy to find through podcasts like mine, YouTube channels like yours, the books. And now you can sort of layer on what I call the more optional pieces, or the nuances, things that you might have to do, or things that might resonate with your context, things that you're getting into, like natural farming. You don't need to do natural farming to have a successful market farm, but you have to have a successful market farm to do natural farming, I think, in the long term. Yeah. And greenhouse designs and tool designs and no-till, like all these other little things, you're starting to see this explosion of these sub-niche topics, because people can now do this and they can make money off of it. Right. And now it's like, okay, I'm making money, it's working, I can now focus on some other areas to improve and make things better.
Yeah, and we're about to see another explosion of innovation, I'm sure, in agriculture, especially with natural farming, Korean natural farming, all these different techniques that we're using, these ecological methods, these methods that focus on biology and soil biology, and the world that's now opened up to us over the last 20 years in soil science. Very basic level, we know how they operate now. We know the relationship between the plants and the fungi and the microbes, the macro arthropods, and all the different creatures under the soil, and how necessary that is for the plant's health and the whole communication network under the ground. And then again, how that relates to our human health, our gut biome. Even the food that we're eating has microbiology on it, and we're consuming that, and it's inoculating our gut. So I think the recognition of microbiology, to me, is like the next step in farming, and it's a real focus point for myself personally, and something that I'm trying to learn about constantly, so I can bring that information to the larger community.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a choose your own adventure now with gardening and farming. It's going to pick the path that's right for you. There's all these little blocks you can pull apart like Legos and stick together and create a homestead, a garden, a farm that is really going to be a fit for your context, where you live, your market, and what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, the context is so key, you know. That's why I always try to encourage people not to get stuck on one method or one way of doing things, you know. I'm an only back-to-eating grower, and that's the only way I do things. I'm an only no-till grower, and that's the only way to do things. You know, I think it's thinking about your context, what you're trying to accomplish. You know, are you trying to make money, or just grow food for your family? Are you trying to homestead? Think about all those things, and then, you know, grab the pieces from the different methods that will work in that context. And there's a lot of crossover between all these different methods. Like, we're using all these different words: natural farming, regenerative farming, no-till, Korean natural farming. All these things, to me, it's all focused on soil biology and natural systems. So that's, to me, the linking point that links all these different methods together, and why we can kind of combine these different methods together to suit our needs.
Yeah, when you think context, I mean, this is one thing I think where a lot of people stumble or get stuck, where they try and force, say, a method that doesn't fit with their context. And by context, I mean, like, you know, what does your life look like? How much time do you have available? What resources do you have available? Resources could be time, they could be money, they could be a lot of land, they could be a little bit of land, they could be abundance of labor or volunteer labor. I think people really need to take a hard look at what they're trying to do, like what their goal is for their growing. And I don't want to say farming, because it might be a garden situation. What are you trying to do? And then what methods are going to enable you to do that best without rocking the boat on the rest of life? You know, I'm a dad of 3, I run a business, I do podcasts, I do YouTube. I love gardening, but I can't spend 5 hours a day gardening, and sometimes I get 5 hours a week. So I kind of have to pick and choose tools and methods that enable me to get done what I want to do in the garden within that time period. Where if you just try and say, oh, I'm going to go at it this way because this is what so-and-so said I should, if it doesn't overlap with who you are and what life looks like for you, things fall apart pretty quickly. And, you know, like your neighbor's backyard who's not very kept up. I've seen a lot of gardens that turn that way. They start out with the best intentions, and then they fall apart, they falter, because I don't think people really take the time to say, what am I doing here? Where do I want to go with it, and what resources do I have to realistically make this happen? And then weigh stuff, and then ruthlessly say no to certain techniques and certain tools and certain maybe crops, and just focus on what you can do and what you can execute.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great recommendation, especially for people starting out growing. So Diego, you weren't always doing this work with podcasting and growing food and stuff. So, you know, what were you doing before this? I know that you were kind of in the corporate world before this. You know, how did you make your transition out of the corporate world until now? You know, and I really want to ask you, like, how did you get the courage to do it? Because that's something that's so tricky when you're, you got a family you got to take care of, you've got a really stable income with benefits probably, and then you've also got this thing of, hey, well, I've got a dream, I've got a passion, I've got this thing I just feel called to do. And then how do you make the leap to where this passion makes you money? How did you go through that?
It's tough, and this is the big struggle and the big question that I think a lot of people have trouble with. I think I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs, a lot of people who have started businesses that have succeeded and failed. So I'd say my general observation is there are people who are entrepreneurs and there are people who aren't. Like, that's just how it is. Like, some people aren't cut out for this. I don't think my wife is an entrepreneur, and I think she would go as far as to say that herself. I don't think I'm unique, but I think I am part of a unique set of people who are willing to just say, hey, I'm going to take this leap, an educated leap, and go for it, and I'm going to risk, public embarrassment, humiliation, financial losses, wasted time, wasted effort, failure, all these things. Like, all those are barriers that hold people back.
A lot of fear in there. Right?
There is, fear at every level. Yeah. Because, people are always more afraid of losing something than gaining something. Like, people would rather they're more afraid to lose $1 than they would be excited to gain $1. Like
Yes, that's very true.
That's just how it all shakes out when you look at a lot of psychological testing. So I think I just went for it. And I figured, okay, initially it was very blind, ignorant leap, saying, okay, I have this idea, I'm going to go for it, I have passion, let's create a business around the passion. And that was the conference, which I started back in, talking about in 2012. Right. And here we are in 2019. And I think starting a business around a passion is kind of like not the best approach. Later, when I went on to start Paper Pot, I started that around identifying a need and filling that need or filling the demand with a solution. And that solution worked. That was a lot better of an approach. So I think, you got to kind of find this overlap of what are you excited about, where is there demand that people will pay for, and where's your skill set, and merge those together. But yeah, I mean, coming out of the corporate world, it was one of those things where I was just sick of it. Like, I didn't want to sit there, and I didn't like the job anymore. I loved the job at one point in time, but it got old, it got tiresome, it lost its excitement, and I realized I needed to do something, and I kind of started, again, with the passion, forcing a square peg into a round hole, but at least I was trying. I kind of looked at it that way, like I'm making the move. And I think for a lot of people, sometimes getting that move started is almost better than seeing results in a way, because you're like, hey, I'm changing, I'm doing this. Like sometimes putting in new garden beds is more exciting than growing the crops, later on, because you're like, I'm changing, I'm doing the gardening thing.
Yeah, that's when change feels really good, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Yeah, and as you were talking about filling a niche, it kind of reminded me of an analogy of nature. In nature, the same thing happens, in an ecosystem. When there's an ecological niche, there's an animal that will adapt and change its DNA and its body to adapt to that niche. And I think that's what good businesses do too. Business owners, they're looking for that niche that they can fill and serve a role and provide value. And this is why I always talk about patterns of nature, and why I call my farm and everything nature's always right, because these patterns, this analogy I've given you, this is happening at every scale, on the micro level, even to the macro, even in the universe. So recognizing that.
Yeah, and it ties into, like, let's look at farming, right? Like, a lot of people watching your channel, listen to the podcast I do, they want to start farming, and they say, I'm gonna start a farm, I'm gonna start growing things. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Because that could mean a lot of things. You want to set yourself up for success, so you might be passionate about farming, but you have to find the demand within your local market that defines, okay, what need is your farm going to fill within the market. And too many people, they leap into the farming thing first, they grow a bunch of stuff, they can't sell it, then they find themselves in trouble, they go out of business. I mean, this happens all the time in this space. This is not while the models are there, this is not a foolproof, fail-proof system, but you can lower the risk and lessen the risk of failure by doing these types of market analysis over time, and identify, like, where are those needs, where are the vacuums that need to be filled in here.
Yeah, totally. And I think for people starting out, my biggest recommendation, and actually the biggest recommendation from almost every farmer I hear, is start small. Don't over-diversify in the beginning. Build skills slowly over time. Keep reanalyzing your systems, and keep innovating those systems and making them better and more efficient every year. And don't ever think of your business. I think the death of a business is when you think you're done. And I've got the perfect business model. It's always going to work this way. This is how I make my revenue. And just don't get stuck, I guess, in one way of thinking, and for your business, or even how you garden. Because I'm changing my techniques all the time out here. Trying new things, trying to make it more efficient, or try to make it better for the soil health or whatnot.
It's consistency over reps. Everybody wants to go big at the beginning. They want to do a lot. And what's more important is you do it for a long time than you do a bunch big and then you do a bunch big for a short period of time. Like, it just doesn't work. And we all have a bigger bite than we can handle for the most part, I think, in one bite itself. So you got to dial it back. Everything's going to take longer. Everything's going to require more work, more money than you expect. So I agree with you. Start small, and then that way you can test stuff, and failure is also small. It's easy to grow. I mean, you want to try and shoot for opportunities that are going to get big enough for you to fulfill where you want to go. Like, it doesn't make any sense to start a farm that's going to do $5,000 a year in sales if you need $45,000 a year to live on. Like, that's a waste of time. But if you have to start the $45,000 farm initially, where the first year is $5,000 in sales, and the second year, okay, we're going to scale up, we're going to do 15, and there's the whole plan. Well, that makes some sense. So yeah, working up to it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that the smaller that you start too, you minimize your risk to having a macro failure, like a huge failure. And a huge failure is hard to recover from. It's debilitating, it's shameful, it's all those things. And but if you can keep it smaller and grow slowly, then you might have these little micro fails, but that's okay. Those are awesome lessons to learn from and get better from. And it's not going to be so detrimental to your psyche when a small problem happens versus complete failure.
Yeah, and the emotional side of things is huge, and this is where a lot of my content throughout the years is focused on, because I think this is a massive catalyst. I mean, it's what stops people from starting, and it's what stops people from restarting when they run into a roadblock or failure or a slow period. A lot of people only have so much emotion they can put towards failing, and if you fail really hard once, sometimes us as individuals, like we have a hard time working past that. Sometimes you only have so much emotional capital with people in your family. I have 3 kids, I have a wife. If I'm going to start a business and it's like, well, okay, all my weekends at nights, I'm going to have to take off from you guys. I'm not going to get to see you as much while we try and get this thing rolling. How many years in a row, how many failures can I go through before, my wife is like, this isn't working? Mm-hmm. So you have to look at kind of the other people involved too and say, what is the cost of failure here? And it goes back to what you're saying is failing small. People can deal with small failures. We can deal with small failures. So yeah, on the gardening side, farming side, business side, you start small, prototype, get something going, get some traction, get some success, use that momentum to really leverage it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing here in my backyard, and that's why I'm doing my YouTube channel, so I can show you guys how to start small. Right now, I'm really dialing in my techniques. I know what works now, and now when I scale up someday, me and my wife hope to buy some land at some point in the next couple of years. Now I can take all my systems that I've been developing and innovating, and boom, take it somewhere else, and now I can build a farm that's going to be crazy successful because I've been through all those micro failures and just continued to make my business better and my farming better.
Yeah, at a certain point in everything, it's work to learn, not to earn. And depending on where you're at in life, on the hobby side of things, on the business side of things, maybe the age side of things, finance side of things, to try and learn something brand new like farming and run a successful business at the same time can be very taxing, can be very hard for a lot of people. So, dabbling on a small scale, prototyping stuff on a small scale in the near term, while say you have that full-time job, I'm going to run my backyard garden as though it was a farm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to keep track of expenses. I'm going to keep track of yields. Well, what if I could sell, all of this lettuce at this pound? What would this all look like? But there's no financial loss. You feed it to your chickens, you give it to neighbors, you eat it, those types of things.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. That's a really good way to start your first farm, actually, I think. Talk to your friends and family, just build those skills, and then the next step is, how do I cut down on hours at my full-time job? And that's what I did. I just slowly cut back hours at my job until I could finally make the jump and just pursue the passion full-time, because I had my systems in place, my debt was paid off, and I had a decent revenue stream coming in that I could survive on.
It can be hard, though, I think, nowadays, too, for a lot of people in this instant gratification culture that social media fosters of, I post a picture and like right away I can see people liking it or commenting on it, of this idea of learning something over a few years. Like that idea almost, I think, sounds antiquated to people, or like, what, right. I'm gonna do this for 3 years to learn it? That's craziness. But it is the way it's all gonna happen. I've been doing this now, whatever it is, 7 years, and I can tell you there was a lot of practice in the beginning. It was live education, and it's only been within the last few that I really feel like I've found my footing and really feel comfortable in what I'm doing. So if I didn't have those early years of kind of trying stuff, learning on the fly, I wouldn't be here today. It didn't all start easy and successful. It was definitely a lot of work and a journey to get here.
Totally. Yeah, and I think a lot of people, myself included, when you see when you see a successful person, you're seeing them in one of their best forms. Like, you didn't see the 10 years it took to get to this level. And one of my favorite things to do, and like when I first started YouTubing, to make myself less scared to be on camera, I'd go back in time to some of my favorite YouTubers, like really popular people like Casey Neistat or Peter McKinnon, or some of these really big time YouTubers that are just, have huge on camera personalities. And I went back and I looked at their first videos, and it's like, whoa, they don't have that personality. They don't have very good on camera persona, and they're not that entertaining to watch. And it just let me know that, hey, like, I can start where I am here, and I can just keep building. And then just like those guys, I can get to the point where I'm really excellent on camera too. And that's been something I've learned as I got older, that you actually can change yourself. You could change pretty much anything about yourself. If you work hard on that issue, and you can grow in all areas of your life. But saying that, it takes a long time, like we're discussing. It's not like, I've been doing YouTube for a year, I put thousands of hours into it, and now I feel at the point where I am now comfortable on camera. I'm decent at editing now. I've built these skills up. But if I would have stayed in that fear state where it's like, I don't know, like, I'm worried about sounding stupid, or, not getting my point across correctly, or I look weird, or they're going to talk about my eyebrows, or whatever it may be, the whole concept of just kind of going for it, you got to learn how to do that. Jump into that cold water and not be scared to do it.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of, I look at podcasts I've done, I look at YouTube videos I've done, and I don't want to say it's throwaway content, but that's how you try stuff, that's how you get better. And you hear stories about, I forget where I heard this, but they're telling a story of like, Chris Rock goes on HBO at the Met in New York, and it's a sellout crowd. Every joke is funny, and it's only funny because he's gone to a lot of smaller clubs, tried a lot more material, and kept the stuff that worked and jettisoned the stuff that doesn't. And then people see Chris Rock at the smaller clubs and they're like, he's not that funny. Well, he's trying stuff. And a lot of YouTubers who are working their way up, a lot of podcasters, a lot of farmers, like at some point you're doing stuff to see, okay, does the market care about this? Do the people watching care about this? Do I like doing this type of stuff? It's not always for like, this is the final ultimate thing. Like, this is a continuum here that we're working towards. So yeah, a year of doing videos, and I saw this my first year of doing YouTube and really trying to publish consistently for a year, is you're getting comfortable, you're figuring things out, and people fall into the trap of wanting to start and be Casey Neistat or JM or whomever right at the gate at day one, and it's just not going to happen. You're going to have that floundering and faltering in the middle, and it's tough because it can be humbling to realize, like, okay, like this isn't going as good as I thought. 5 people watched this video. Why am I doing this? But you got to look long term.
Yeah, everything in life, like, you gotta have the long-term perspective. You really do. I know that we're all pushed to think short-term, but it's going to be disastrous for you. I can pretty much say in any aspect of your life, whether it's business or farming or friendship or whatever it may be. So, speaking about skills and always constantly improving, I was kind of curious, what is something new that you're working on or that you want to work on this next year? Is it, whether it's a gardening skill or something in business or just personal life stuff? It's something you're trying to build right now.
Yeah, okay, so I'll give you a theme and then I'll take it down to a gardening, because a lot of people are into gardening watching this. So the theme is rigidly organizing everything, taking everything that I'm doing that kind of felt a little bit winging it and helter-skelter last year because it didn't have its place on a calendar, and simplifying it down to this is when I do it or this is how I do it. Instead of like one time, let's say now I'm moving to gardening, sometimes I'm seeding my flats here, sometimes I'm seeding them here. I just recently this weekend built out a new seeding station where I'm going to seed my flats, and I'm trying to build that as a prototype, but solve a lot of the problems that I had in the past. Not enough room, not everything in one place, not enough lighting, those types of things. So that's one thing I'm trying to do with everything that is gardening this year, is get loose ends, get some of the chaos and scatter that I had in previous years, and really lock it down. And that might mean buying a piece of equipment to solve the problem. It might mean building something. It might mean creating a process for something. And it might also mean like just saying, I'm not going to do these things. Or like I wanted to plant raspberry bushes this year and I almost bought them, but I'm like, I don't have a great permanent spot for them. I'm just going to take it on next year, versus stressing about where am I going to put these things. Then I got to move them down the line. It's like, just that can wait. I don't need to have those right now. So that's one of my main focuses this year.
That's awesome. Do you think in past years you would have maybe said yes to the raspberries, but you've kind of learned just to say no more? Or
yeah, no,
something
definitely.
You've gotten better at?
Definitely. No, 100%. It's been saying no to more stuff. Like, I'll give you one example too of like, I just have trouble growing a lot of lettuce in the system that I had previously. And I started looking at like, I can buy organic lettuce at Costco for like $4. I get that's maybe not the best in some people's eyes, but I kind of look at that like that fits the rest of my life. Something I was talking about earlier in the video. Like, I'm already buying some other stuff there. I'll buy that there, and I'll grow the stuff that I can't grow at Costco instead of stressing about growing lettuce and not having it turn out and wasting bed space and getting all angry about it. Like, I'm just gonna buy that thing. So yeah, so that's been like a no in the past. I feel like with kids, with businesses, with everything I'm doing, I'm a good starter of projects, and I'm not always the best seeing it from A to Z.
That's hard.
And I'm really trying to say, if I'm gonna start it now, I wanna know what the path is to completion. But before I start anything new, unless it's critical, like if it's not solving a huge problem that I have, I'm not taking it on. Like the seed problem was a big problem in the past, so I took it on. Other optional projects like the raspberries, that stuff's on hold because I want to finish all previous outstanding projects that I have started and kind of tie up these loose ends. Some of these things are years old. Okay, I started this project 2 years ago. It was relevant then. It's not relevant now. It's a sunk cost in terms of time and energy. Like, sometimes you keep these things around like, oh, I worked on it, I bought it, I put this money into it. But if it doesn't resonate with me now, if it doesn't fit life now, like, I'm junking it. So that's the general theme of 2019. Make things easier, say no to more stuff, standardize stuff. Because in the past I've tried to do it all, and as a result I've done not much successfully. Where now I'm trying to do less better.
Yeah, I like that. One of my friends gave me another fellow gardener, Kevin from Epic Gardening, told me when I was starting YouTube and stuff. He runs a gardening website and YouTube and podcasts, and I was like, hey man, I want to start writing articles and I want to have a podcast. I want to do this and that. And he's like, hey, whoa, man, like, slow down. You're going to kill yourself from 1,000 cuts. And what that basically means is you're spreading yourself too thin, you know? These little cuts aren't going to kill you, but when they add up, you're just doing way too many things. And you're going to fail at all of them now because you're not focusing in on those things that are actually bringing value to yourself or to business. So I think about that a lot, especially this last year as well. And I'm trying to do what you're saying as well, is say no to more things, do the things that have the most value for either my audience or for me or for,
Yeah, I mean, when I first went on YouTube to do more of the vlogging style videos, it was about 2 years ago in February. And at the time I was doing that, I was doing a daily podcast, like a 7-day-a-week podcast, plus 3 one-day-a-week podcasts, and then everything else. And eventually it got to be like, it's too much. And I had to like cut back on stuff for my sanity, and like I lost some of the creative drive to do it all. So that's when I kind of slowed down on YouTube and changed my YouTube strategy around, because I was dying by all these cuts. And now the focus has been the podcast, and as I get these systems built up in the background, I think it's going to make doing more videos like at my place easier into the future. But I'm not even going to try and do those videos till that stuff is ready, because it's kind of like it's building something on a already shaky foundation. You can duct tape it together for a while, but eventually it just crumbles down.
Yes, it does fall apart eventually. Yeah, either your relationships are falling apart or your business starts falling apart. Something's coming apart at the seams eventually.
Right, and you don't have to do it all. It's like,
Yeah,
sometimes like when we're driven, and
That's
I think
the
you're driven, like you feel like, oh, I want to do the YouTube, and then maybe then I pressure you, like, why do you want to do YouTube? And you're like, well, I want to share this knowledge. Why do you want to share the knowledge? And if you just kind of ask why several times to yourself of why you want to do something and get to the core, you really get down to like, do you really want to do this or not? Does it really matter? It's one thing to do stuff for fun, but it's another thing to sign up for commitments and spend money and time doing something that just doesn't take you to where you want to go.
So we've been talking a lot about working really hard, not spreading ourselves too thin, but we've also talked about passion, being driven, trying to do it all. I know as someone else who's driven and works all the time, and because they're driven by this passion, there's some self-sacrifice that comes into play. What is driving your passion, I guess, for the regenerative ag movement?
I think part of me like felt that mission within me, but I think I have had to throttle that back. And first and foremost, like self-care, like the debatable zone 0 in permaculture, like that comes first. I can't worry about what's happening in zone 5 if I'm not healthy. And I see this in a lot of people as well. There's a lot of things people deal with in life, and I needed to make sure like I was good, my family unit was good, and then I could kind of just go where life took me. So the driver really is, okay, one, I need to support my family in a lifestyle that allows us to live the way we want to live. Not that we have extravagant lifestyle, but we have an abundance of time, like time that I can spend together. So that means if I'm going to do something, it has to be tied to income, because that will allow me to take some extra time off each week to spend with my daughters. Now, I've set myself up in a way so my income makes that positive change. So I don't have to like double up. I can do the podcast, which helps promote my business, and the podcast is free, and that inspires people, that gets some change out there. But it has the business tie. I don't now have to also go out and say like, I'm gonna do something else for the cause. Like, we can only do what we can. I learned that from Dennis Hayes. He's the guy who founded Earth Day in the early 70s, the first Earth Day organizer, and he just said, do what you can do. And that's it. Don't worry about all of the world's problems. Focus on what you can do to make a positive contribution in that. And that's where I'm at with change. So the drivers are, my lifestyle for my family, ensuring that I'm healthy and energized both physically and mentally, because I look at it like, again, something that I've said earlier in this video regarding business. If you make a big change or you try to make a big change quickly for a short term, that might be like, let's say 10 units of change. But what if I make half a unit of change every year for 50 years? Like, that adds up to be more change net.
Compounding interest.
The kind of compound. So I look at myself as like, yeah, I got to do stuff that keeps me in the game long term. And if that means slowing the pace, so be it. Like, what's better, that I'm still doing this 10 years from now, or that I flame out and burn out, which a lot of people do because they push too hard. So I try and put positive change out there. I try and highlight things that are positive stories and not dwell on the negative that's out there. But honestly, it's not a huge driver. I think at this point it's just became a byproduct. Like, it's kind of built into everything I do. Like, there's going to have this positive ripple through it.
Yeah.
But it all goes back to self-care and how we're doing, because I've seen people blow up, fail, in family situations fail because people try and do too much for a cause, and then they burn out and the cause suffers. And so.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about the burnout, because you have all this passion up front and you expend all that passion and fire, and then you end up going back to doing your corporate job or your other thing. All that impact's gone. All that dream you had to influence all these people is gone. And if you would have just slowed down and spread it out more over time, now the ability to affect a lot more people is there. And I think that's a great point, and something I'm trying to learn all the time too, to slow myself down. And so it's really great to hear a lot of the wisdom that Diego's brought us, and I know it's really helped me kind of figure a few things out, and I'm going to incorporate a few of his suggestions into my business and personal life as well. So thank you so much, Diego, for coming over and talking with me.
No, I really appreciate you having me on your channel, sharing it with your audience, and thanks for doing what you're doing on your farm here in San Diego and with everybody watching on YouTube. I mean, we need more people like Steven out there that take some of this information, run with it, share it, inspire more people. So good on you for doing it and sticking with it.
Oh, thank you so much, man. That means a lot. And so what's like the best way if people want to dive into your content, which I highly recommend, where can they get it?
Yeah, there's 3 places I'll give you. If you want to watch on YouTube, just search for Diego Footer right here on YouTube. You'll see my videos and tons of presentations that other people have given at past conferences that I've done, all for free. Great resource there. If you're interested in the livestock side of things and you want to learn more, I do a podcast on the livestock side of things. That's at grassfedlife.co. Also have a livestock online course that I co-teach with a livestock farmer, Darby Simpson, Indiana. And if you want to listen to the vegetable side of things, visit paperpot.co/podcast, or just search for Farm Small, Farm Smart, wherever you listen to podcasts, and you'll find the vegetable side of things, or even Permaculture Voices. That's a 4th one in there where you can find me. So a lot of places to find me online, just depending on how you want to consume what I'm putting out.
Cool. Yeah. Well, once again, just can't recommend his content enough. Like I said, he's got the best minds in the business. Not only just the business world, but farming, all sorts of different things. So yeah, definitely go check it out, you guys. You'll really, really enjoy what he's put out. All right, thanks again, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, people.
Bye.